you all have had some time to sit with the Inside Out path, including the practices of it. So this video, I would not watch at all out of context. Hopefully most of you, I think you are following along with every video. I'm just reminding you that in my experience, the best way to do this path and to understand it is to start with a video that I did on YouTube. Again, December 2022, January 2023. KI map, an introduction and overview. The map was like 3 or 4 years in the works, in a way, of just sharing the insights of reversing repression, or you could say, yeah, through that process, this path was developing, trying to explain to people how I bypassed anger and some other things and how that created problems for me. And as a non-dual teacher, I couldn't even stand to come back and talk about the subject of awakening if I didn't include those insights, because of the bypass was so massive for me. So I'm not going to appeal to those who are just kind of doing a drive-by, looking for this or that momentary teaching that points to presence or something. There are certainly plenty of good teachers out there that do that. I want to talk about something else, which is healing and embodying that presence. And that's what I've been talking about. The Inside Out path is just like that. Here in my long and winding bypass, at the very end, or yeah, after 15 years of doing this thing as a teacher, eventually I got to the point of reversing the repression of anger. So those insights shed a lot of light on, you don't hear about people talking about reversing repression. Well, I mean, certainly it happens. It's a particular thing. We're reversing the mechanism. We're actually making it conscious. It's not just like, it's not like a lot of other things out there, actually. And it's an embodiment approach. And if you listen to me long enough, I think you'll find out why you struggle on the awakening or healing path. I think that this path explains a lot of that. And so it starts with that map video, but then it continues on, and then you'll see me introduce at some point shortly after that. There's not a lot of videos, just kind of maybe one a week. Then you'll see me talk about the Inside Out path. There's lots of videos on the way that are helpful, and each video builds upon the path. And then the main practices are laid out in the video. Here's the key, now use it. And then after that are the videos, anger, repression, and the Inside Out path. And then I would say anybody who has a primary repression of anger should watch that and focus there, and then follow along with me. And those who have a primary repression of sadness, watch the sadness repression and Inside Out path video, follow along from there. So if you're watching this video, this would be in a series. If you watch it just out of context, I don't think we're going to connect. Maybe some, but not, because you really have to be doing this work to connect on what I'm about to say here, I think. Thinking about it won't really, you won't resonate with this talk if you're just thinking about it, or if you haven't done any of the practices, or if you haven't been following the videos. So I would say your best bet is to stop watching. If you're just tuning into me after a few years or just finding me, this is not the video to start with. I think you want to go back to that video and just follow along. Okay. I have some wonderful dark chocolate, hot chocolate. This is so delicious, but I'm going to have to heat it up at a certain point here in the talk. But you won't know because I'll just click and I'll come back. The pitfalls, no. The traps and hiding places of the Inside Out path. As with any spiritual practice, it has its traps and pitfalls or hiding places. It has some unique ones, actually. The way that we contextualize it, the way that we talk about it might make it sound unique. Some of the actual traps are unique because we're getting to that, making the deep unconscious conscious, the stuff that the control mechanisms around our emotions, we're making that conscious. So you can imagine that there would be pushback, there would be shutdown, there would be fear, there would be sabotage, there'd be resistance. And so therefore that creates this interesting set of potential traps And then also I would say hiding places is a word or a term that I want to use, because I've always talked about the traps of awakening, obviously a big one. Oh my gosh, I have to admit this. A big trap of awakening is repression and trauma. It's the big bypass in my view. So here we are in 2023, where I have to say as a teacher, all the times that I talked about pitfalls of awakening, I didn't catch that one. And that was the big one. And this is why, I didn't know that I was in anger repression talking about the pitfalls of awakening before I reversed the repression of anger. The irony runs deep. So here I am. Well, what we learn from that is what I often say, I think, is I don't know what I don't know. I can't see what I can't see, and I can't feel what I can't feel. So I'm always a beginner. But a beginner with skill, a beginner who doesn't just fall prey to the avoidance patterns of the past, but skill and then looking freshly in each moment. I've been laying out the path for that, how to do that in the inside out way. So what are the traps and hiding places? There's no way that I can say them all, because any belief system can be a trap. First of all, Krishnamurti said, you can't inquire from a belief. Well, you actually can, but you'll bypass. So I would say, if I have the belief, well, I agree with him, actually. You can't actually. You can, but it's an avoidance. It's like you're self-protecting. So if I sit here, for example, and believe that I'm an addict, I believe that that's what I am, and I start doing inquiry, that belief will steer the inquiry. If I totally believe that there's no way that I'll ever feel and express anger, if that's a belief that I hold in my body from childhood, repression, then that's going to steer my practice and my life. So what we believe matters. Of course, we do inquiry to deconstruct these self-limiting beliefs, or to see through them, see them that they're not what we thought they were. They're just. But until you've seen through them, you have beliefs. So we have beliefs while we're inquiring. In Krishnamurti, I think he's saying you can't really inquire from a belief. It's a very sharp pointer. He's basically saying, check into what you're believing as you're just here and present. Check into your assumptions behind your inquiry, check into what it is that you're believing, and even like where you think you're going with it. All those assumptions. Are you seeking? Are you using inquiry to seek? Is there a belief there? And a limitation and separation that's doing the inquiry. So I think that one of the biggest traps, it took me all that to say that, is just really not being earnest in some way, and just not earnest enough to get to the really core beliefs that are operating and even driving your spiritual path, just in a general way. Being kind of caught in certain beliefs, I'm not even getting to repression yet, or trauma, but just beliefs. I mean, it could be, I'm trying to think of another one would be, if you're so convinced, for example, that there is or there is not life after death, that would influence the kinds of things you would inquire into. If you don't really absolutely know, which you probably don't, right? You're believing it then. So that belief probably keeps you safe. And beliefs like that keep you safe are the kinds of beliefs that we tend not to look at, or we might not look at. And then they influence how we're inquiring. So what Dan and I say from the beginning is that bring all beliefs onto the inquiry table. As they come up or as they're noticed, and the ones that you believe the most are probably a good place to start, because we believe them the most. And that's where we really find, that we're getting love and staying safe by those beliefs that we believe the most, because they protect us the most. So they protect us in inquiry. In other words, they protect us from really going to the places that would really open us up. Okay, there's that trap. Another trap is like sort of going half the way and stopping, and then sort of planting your feet in the ground and building up a way of talking about it where you even purport to others to say to others that you're farther along than you really are, because on some level you're still seeking approval. For example, we're trying to get love or stay safe. So, you don't really want to go into the buried rage or the buried sadness. So you want to, but not that deeply into it. And so you stop and you sort of set up camp where you stopped. You have every right to stop. But what you can do is you can influence other people who do need to go deeper for either a physical or some emotional healing or something. And if you stop and you start speaking from that, you might be actually, because you're afraid, you might be influencing other people to be afraid, to not go deeper. And you might not even know you're doing it. Like, so we've definitely had facilitators. I, as a teacher, did that. I think we all can do that. And many of us will do that. But if we're not aware of it, we can influence people in a not great way, in that way, because we are afraid and we're not owning up to it. And then we turn around and we try to facilitate or train or help others. I think the answer to all that is transparency. Just coming out and saying, I repress anger. I have an addiction. I had an addiction to sex. I've had shame that I haven't been able to get to until third dimension KI. Just coming out and saying these things have affected my life in the following ways. So that when you stop, or if you stop, or even if you're just processing along the way here with us still, you don't use your unconsciousness in a way that negatively influences others and keeps them back, like keeps them from healing or seeing something, and that happens actually. You don't actually have to be a trainer or a facilitator or a teacher to do that. We do it to each other all the time. Like in subtle ways in relationship, if we're trauma bonded in a certain way, we may not want the other person to get free. That person may not want us to get free because we've bonded in some way through the trauma. And it could be teacher student. It could be friend. It could be trainer. So what do we mean by bonded? It means we're both staying safe. But we may be telling ourselves certain things about the depth of our experience and our practice, but we're reinforcing certain belief systems, or we're just simply both not going there because one person is blind to it. And so they influence the other to be blind to it. Friends can do that to friends. Teachers do that to students. Facilitators in the past have done that to clients of all methods and practices, right? The blind leads the blind, doesn't know that it's blind. That's why it's leading, because it doesn't know. So that's another one of the traps. So how does that break down? And that's a big trap, because this work is all about embodiment and being free of that, of the limitations and the heaviness of trauma. Alice, there's no other way to say it. Be free of the heaviness and the limitations and the deep frozen fear of trauma. If this is a path that we have to that kind of deep healing, to that kind of clarity, then you can imagine that if people along the way who are leading the way in some way start bypassing, like what if tomorrow or in the future, people were trusting me and I just led them because I didn't want to go to a certain place. I led them away from something. That's what I did earlier in my teaching. I led people away from anger, even though many of them needed that to heal. So basically that's what can happen now. Like as you guys awaken, you might You might say, well, I'm becoming more aware of my repression and how, but see, it's very subtle. So you might do a little bit of work, but then you land in some area of safety. You start sharing in a way that's simply safer than going through with the process of reversing that repression. And so see how you influence people. So what do we do? Do none of us feel confident to help other people? It shouldn't be that. I think transparency. See, because usually what I've noticed through the years is if somebody's really stuck, in other words, there's just something they don't want to feel, they don't want to go to, and they're a teacher or a trainer or even a friend helping a friend, they're like the last person to admit that they're stuck. They can't. They literally can't until they do enough inquiry, have enough consciousness in the stuckness to then be transparent about it, to not be so unconscious that you just don't acknowledge it, but to be conscious of it and to say, there's a certain, I'm having difficulty with a certain area. And so if you have that problem, I don't know if I can help you. I mean, we just don't do that. We have to be really careful in this path because anybody can sort of stop along the way when there's this path being laid out for somebody. If they want to go all the way, there being no end to the depth of freedom. But then people stopping along the way, and those are traps. Big trap in KI, actually. Dan and I have seen this. Whoa, if we could paint this picture for you of what we've seen through the years, not just in the Kiloby inquiries, but in other organizations, 12-step living inquiries, other recovery programs. Yeah. Watch out for the trap of becoming resistant to this work and then getting really busy helping others. That's a trap. That's a big trap, actually, because about when that starts happening is when I start noticing that a lot of the old habits come back for us. Like we start disconnecting from people. The anger repressor starts disconnecting because they don't go deeply into the rage. And so the same kinds of stuff happens even as you get into KI. Is like your triggers happen and you don't look at them. That can happen. Any of us can shut down when we get scared. And when we do, if we're helping others, that's the thing. And everybody helps everybody here. So everybody has to be kind of aware of it. That I'm, just to say I'm shut down around, I don't even like to go. I've stopped inquiring on such and such. And to say that to people is really difficult. To say that I've got a lot of buried rage, for example, that I want to work through, but I'm resistant to, is really hard to say to people. I suppose that's why teachers don't. We complain about the teachers not being transparent or some weird unconscious thing, and they're dealing with the same thing. It happens here. Don't have to even be a teacher or a trainer for it to happen. Just lack of transparency, shut down, and then blinding, just blinding. It's so blinding. I've watched this happen so many times through the years. I hope you can understand the trap that I'm talking about, but it would be like, if you think about a conveyor belt, that what Dan and I have created is like, we're inviting people to go fully through this embodiment, deprogramming, like true authenticity, reversing repression, challenging work, but super rewarding, a conveyor belt, so to speak. And then along the way, people get scared and they just try to stop the conveyor belt, or they camp right out somewhere on it. And then as people come up the conveyor belt, they're trying to get their attention. No. And what they're doing is they're just trying to stay safe. It's like, let me just get together with other people and and I've seen it before. And camps form like, well, you can become a camp, right? You yourself can become like a sabotaging, just camping out in a sabotage by yourself, right? We all do from time to time do that, right? And stuck in resistance. But imagine then if you start helping people and then you're stuck in resistance becomes something that you is contagious and other people get stuck in your resistance. That's the trap. Along the conveyor belt, when we stop being open to the real depth of freedom and healing, we really just turn away from it in some way, knowing that we still have trauma there, knowing that there's still repression there, and then we turn around to the others and we're not transparent about it. See, that's why I had to come out and say, I'm working through the femme repression here. Like, and doing makeup on camera was like me after doing inquiry about the frozen fear of that and coming out and telling you, yeah, I'm still working through that. Or if you remember me talking about the shame that I encountered during the chronic pain, I did a video where I talked about the deep shame and that I knew that there was more there. I shared in the members area about that, how some shame and deep in my body in the chronic pain area hung on, and then how that was turning into like different or manifesting different ways of hiding in relationship. Just being able to say that is really actually healthy. And then, but mostly just to the people that you're trying to help, though, like the people that you're working with, your friends, is where it matters. Is, in my close personal relationships, especially like with Chester's, being more open and vulnerable, transparent is the key to everything. And it's the key here too. Vulnerability, transparency. But we're dealing with repression, so people can't be. So that's what I mean. They just go unconscious. So I guess the trap here that I'm talking about, this second trap, is really just like, it's the KI bypass is what it is. It's like, there's an issue there, but you just, for whatever reason, it's not going to go there fully. Going to do it a little bit, going to come back to it again and again. But when it comes right down to it, you probably have a program that says something like, I'll never change, or there's no way I can ever do this or that, or I have to hurt myself, or some programming that you found big in your body, that scared you. And you don't realize it, but maybe the moments that it scared you has trained you to be more and more resistant to that area. It's just how it happens. It's very subtle. And then before you know it, you're doing older habits. I mean, you're engaging in other habits that you were doing before you got here. Like just disconnecting, like anger repressors disconnecting, not speaking up to the people that they're disconnecting to, not seeing the opportunity to process that right there, and instead just disconnecting. Old habits like sadness repressors, just shutting down instead of opening up to vulnerability in moments that are key, or processing in those moments that are key, just dissociating again or getting angry again. And really just not going to the repression. But then the other part of it is bamboozling yourself, the other part, because then either whether you're helping people or trying to teach other people from that, but you've already bamboozled yourself with repression, see? So that's where you have to be careful, is now bamboozling other people because you're not clear on something. That could be a friend, or that could be an entire audience of people, or whatever. A big trap of another trap in any organization like this, you have to take a bigger perspective here, is if you think of Ken Wilber's model, stages of development, many of us in KI have come or are within like the green stage, progressive, equality, fairness, more liberal minded. Not everybody. I'm actually not a liberal or a conservative. I wouldn't define myself that way. But more progressive, more equality, coming often from trauma and repression. We're often victims and we were hurt in the past, and we are behind the movement of consciousness for more equality, for making things right. But yet we can get really stuck there. And that's what Ken is saying, and stuck in not moving through our trauma again, our repression. And then that worldview gets solidified. And then right there, collectively, something happens where everything is like flattened. So that an organization can become like that. That's one of the traps here. It's an organizational trap that happened to me in the past with a prior organizations, which much of traumatized, repressed people were trying to lead. And they couldn't break through that repression barrier. So they were kind of stuck in that green, sort of sick green thing. And they couldn't get to like what Ken calls integral, or it's just trauma and repression, in my view, wasn't being healed. So then the leaders of the organization are basically in sick green and cannot lead because nobody's really allowed to be an authority in sick green because the people are so traumatized. They're literally holding the authority in their bodies, so nobody can lead. That's a big trap organizationally or culturally. When you're in a spiritual organization where you don't have somebody who's actually healing trauma or repression, nobody's leading it. And then you have the leadership, or the whole sea is full of people who are moving through that and can easily kind of pull the organization back to a certain, place that doesn't offer the same degree of healing and clarity. This is an organizational trap that I've seen, and bigger than it could happen in KI if Dan and I are not really straightforward with people to say, this is the path that we've created. We don't want you to hijack that from your trauma and repression. And so that's why we've actually written about it. We've spoken about it. Dan writes about it a lot. Go into the members area and research just green, Dan Green or Sick Green, and there's articles on it that he's written. It's an organizational trap. And there's all kinds of hiding places. I mean, I want to take these other things that could be traps. These are like the usual traps, though. One of the traps is like you get here and you start to do the deep body work, and it's like, and then you just start seeking again. And then like you can't stop. It's like an addiction or something. If you don't see what's happening, your nervous system, see that? Agitated because your trauma has been touched into. So it's like, if you can see that though, then bring the seeking, as I've said in the prior videos, into the repression work, because it's the repression mechanism doing that. It's the trauma trying to get away. It's trying to keep you safe. You can't see it. You can't see the programming until you can see it. This is, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that. It's not safe. It's not safe. But that's what's there. And then on the surface, it's the seeking behavior, but it's being driven by the repression and trauma. Or the addictions start to creep up. And the cravings do. Why? Because you've turned away, or you're not skillful enough on the repression. And so if you start toying with it or activating it a little bit, your system goes, no, we don't feel that one. Well, where's the wine? There it is. So you have to be really mature here to understand that what we're doing is we're activating trauma for the purpose of having skill to move through it and see the emptiness of it, to feel it and allow all of it safely but effectively. So if you just toy with that, see, activating the emotional thing that makes you suffer, essentially, that's what reverse inquiry does. But then you're not skillful when seeking comes up. You don't know how to inquire to see that the seeking is a manifestation of the trauma, and you don't know how to bring it in as such skillfully, or activating it, and then you shut down, but you don't have the skill to understand or work through what's happening for you. Or the compulsions, and they're traps, but this trap is just called lack of skill. This third or fourth trap here is lack of skill, is what that is, because there's skills for all of this, and they're actually pretty simple. It's just about feeling what you don't want to, and then doing it safely through making a mind-body connection conscious. It's actually much simpler than the mind would even think. But the resistance can be very strong. So just watch for that one. And that's really, but see, I don't even want to call that a trap, because if you think about it, what we're doing with Inside Out is, I've already explained to you how your sabotage and your chronic pain and your triggers and your shadows are simply now pointers back to repression. So if you think of it more in like, this is just part of my life. Like I'm going to have triggers. When I do, I know that's the trauma in my body. I know how to go to it. There's the shadows, but that's fine. I know now inside out, I know where that comes from. I repress sadness. See, and I have the skill to go there. That's good. But see, it becomes a trap though, in a way, or a hiding place when all that stuff is going on, but I don't have the skill and I'm not doing anything to raise my skill level, but I'm still dabbling in KI. So I might be activating in different ways with different reverse inquiries, but I don't have the skill to work through what I'm activating in the body. So this lack of skill creates seeking, sabotage, shutdown, which ends up being a huge trap because people will leave KI a lot of the time because of lack of skill. They don't even know that they don't know that that's the issue. They literally don't know what they don't know. They don't know that we've created skill for their shutdown. They don't know that we've created skill for the seeking. They don't know how to do the skill for the compulsion. So they just shut down. And without having any knowledge that we're right here, or they don't ask us, or they don't go for it, their shutdown takes them out. Because it's a trauma response. It's trying to keep them safe. It's not interested in skill. It's interested in safety at that point. So just not knowing that is a trap, not knowing how that happens and why it happens and what skill it takes to move through that becomes a trap. Okay, I have to warm up my hot chocolate now. It has to be actually hot. Dark chocolate, it's not the same. If you really love KI but if you're getting stuck anywhere, I would write down all of these traps, bullet points, and just listen to the video once or twice to see, and just stop after each one and check into it. Because with these kind of things, you're the last to know until you do inquiry and see where you're landing. You could be listening to something and be doing it and totally not hear me. That's the fog out thing. I've seen it so many times. I've said to people, I bet you still have shadows that you're not processing, and that's why you still have pain in your wherever. And they'll say, no, I don't think I do. I've done that. I said, okay, let's pull that person up. That's my sign for, oh, okay, I found it. Repression. That can happen so easily on this video, where you're again being, I think, given some really key points here that could help you. But if you don't stop and just check in to each thing, you could miss it. And so another one is misnaming your primary, or is that the right word? Misnaming. Yeah, I guess. So you come in here and let's say you repress anger. And, if you look around, if you were to actually ask the people close to you, the people that are honest to you will tell you truly. If they're really honest, they'll tell you, do I repress sadness or anger more? Just ask them, they'll tell you. Usually, but don't rely on that completely, of course. But what I'm saying, here's the thing, is one of the traps is when you come here, if you're an anger repressor, anger isn't safe. So your mind does not want it to be anger. So when, if somebody starts talking about hurt or sadness repression, you might be like, yeah, that's it. I'm going to go check that out. But to avoid the anger, you have to be really careful there, because misnaming it can actually be painful, because you're activating repression, but you're going in the wrong direction. You're activating this sense that you can't be vulnerable with people. But then instead of going to anger, which is the primary, you go to sadness, which is the safer one, and you skim. You're on the surface of trauma. That's what I've seen. So, you want to get the primary right. And so if you're not sure, have a couple of sessions with a facilitator, come to the members area, have a conversations with us. And then as a side note to this one, or as the next bullet point, I would say, watch out for sleeper repressions. And this is when, so many of you, which has been really cool. So many of you are just like, at this point, many are saying like, I already don't have any pain, Scott. Like KI took most of the chronic pain, some still have chronic pain, they're working through that, or some of the pain is physical. They might have a physical hormonal or something issue, nerve damage. Not everything is emotional for sure. But like many of you are saying, oh yeah, I don't have pain and I don't really have this body contraction anymore. And it's like almost like a matter of fact, which is really cool. But you're still feeling stuck in a particular area. And that's what's happening. That's another kind of trap, is like, what am I trying to say here? It's like you come here for a particular reason, you get relief in that area and you stop. You have every right to do that, by the way. Like you do have every right to come here and just work on a bad shoulder. And then when the pain goes away, just go about your business and go back to your gardening or your gardening business or your website or whatever you're doing in life. Just go back. And that's perfect. It's like, it's absolutely perfect if you did that. It's exactly what you want. That's what you get. But it can be a trap in the sense of like, okay, so now my shoulder pain's gone, but I'm having great difficulty with my wife. Like we're just not, after year and year and year, we're not connecting. And then it's like, oh, come on, like that's what that is. You just haven't gone deeper with it. So the other trap is like getting a certain issue fixed or dealt with. And then like an Australian friend of mine used to say, near enough, close enough, that's good enough. And it is. But then if there's additional suffering, you have to watch out for like sleepers. Not only sleeper repressions, but just not going deep enough within a repression and then, experiencing either. So let me explain it this way. It's my anger repression. So the chronic pain went away from the anger repression. I didn't apparently have to go into femininity repression for any pain relief, but it was like a sleeper. And frankly, I probably could have never gone into that and been okay. But there were a few compulsions with it, a few shadows, and I just had so much depth of freedom. I thought, why wouldn't I want to? That was how I felt about it. It was like, well, I have so much benefit from the anger repression work. I want to do this. But you can see though, how if you didn't have that attitude about it, you find something else and it scares you. And you might not have chronic pain anymore. That's what I mean. Like I didn't have chronic pain. So what's the motivation? If you don't have something that's like glaring, but you still have repression or you have a sleeper repression, what would motivate you to do it? And the thing is it doesn't really matter. Like you're good either way. I mean, there might be some suffering coming down the road. Of course, any kind of trauma repression unresolved could definitely bring some stuff up, but it might not. You might live to be 88 years old and die of natural causes, whatever that means. And do they still say that? But just watch for it. Just watch for the situation where you've cleared something up, and then you might go about your business because you have that right to, but you may be going about your business because there's something else here that's very scary, and you have every right to run away from that or not deal with that. But I have to tell you, you have no idea. You have no idea, because you're leaving the possibility of that opening, the depth of freedom that could come from that. And see, and also once you learn the KI tools, you don't even have to hang out with us. See, once you know them, you can just go do it. So I would say is like, don't let your resistance be about money. That's another trap. I want to talk about that. Money as a trap. Oh, that's such a big subject. Do I even want to get into that? I guess I have to, because I've already mentioned it. Money is just so many facets to it. The fear around money, the sense of scarcity. I've seen people hide. Speaking of hiding, as one of the traps, is just hide in presence from real financial anxiety, like real scary stuff, fear, like almost like survival stuff, and hanging out in meditation, hanging out in retreats or in awareness, and then how they deal with their finances. And I've done this too, because my dad had a lot of conditioning around money. So until KI was developed, I didn't really know how to get to that deep stuff around it. So it'd just be like money would bring like very low level stress, but it would be in the body. By the time I had sat with the realization that it was low level stress and anxiety, But what I learned is when I went down in there, it's just meant it was unconscious. It was dad stuff. So I think what I mean is like we're in meditation and awareness practices in a way that's like keeping a lot of the deep fear around money buried. Um, this is why I say make it a lived inquiry, because when you get your bills, when you have to pay taxes, when you're running out of money, all of these are opportunities to feel and fully allow the fear that's running your life, basically. But if you simply just kind of go back to your meditation, or I'm just going to rest and see a few stories come and go. I'm talking about the deep fear running everything here. You can get to that here with KI. Have a different relationship with money, even one that feels light and feels like the possibility of abundance. Because when there's fear on it, it doesn't feel like abundance is coming. It's always scarcity. It's always like, I'm not going to have enough. So that I'm not going to have enough in some way affects all areas of life. A lot of people, one of the traps is they just don't bring the money topic to inquiry. And so then that affects their capacity to get services, for example. Some people have thought that, like, for example, I or other facilitators are supposed to give everything away for free because of the fear that they have or beliefs that they have around money, but they just don't understand that, like, there's no way I could do it for free. I mean, I could, but then I just wouldn't be here doing this work because I have to keep my lights on. I have to feed my mouth and my dogs and my healthcare, my car, my insurance, all that, if I gave it away for free. So can't do that. We have to strike some sort of agreement between the two of us that you're going to give a little bit so that I can be here. That's just all there is to it. And so I want you to know that I create the members area to help those people that can't afford big retreats and stuff. I thought, well, just come and pay 30 or whatever dollars a month. And it's like you're in a never ending retreat. We're always there doing the work. So I've tried to respond to the anxiety around money that people have. But at the same time, I want to ask you to meet me there, like to work through the anxiety, because, if I keep giving services or we give services without compensation, it'll go away. We can't sustain it. So it has to work for the facilitators. They have to be able to pay their bills, basically, for us to show up. And that's that side of the money piece. And then for you, I would just say, look, here's the thing I want to say. Time, energy, and money is spent, or you could even say wasted, through a bypass. This is maybe the biggest issue to talk about with money, is that I can tell you, I've already said it on video. I could tell you the number of medical devices and drugs, but drugs were back in the day more like 20s through 30s. I was just addicted heavily to painkillers. But after that, so many medical devices, surgery, so many hospital bills, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars spent on a physical issue that was actually emotional. It was anger repression. So if you want to talk about money, sometimes it's like our bypass is a sabotage. It's the way that we're actually avoiding our repression that's making us have to spend so much money and go in circles or go away from the issue. I was just saying in a recent video that I've watched a lot of sadness repressors and anger repressors because that's the thing we don't want to go to. And we'll spend time, energy, and money going in every other direction. And I did it. I went to Mayo Clinic, doctors, more doctors, medical devices, drugs, street drugs, medications from doctors, back to doctors, surgeons, therapists, craniosacral, massage, somatic movement, nature. Oh my God, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, there's just so many things that I don't even remember the names of them, because I was in pain for so many years, all going away from the root issue. Time, energy, and money. See, so sometimes when you just get wiser on the path, you start to have a better relationship with money, because here you're dealing with the fear, the very core fear that's running everything. And hopefully by doing that, by focusing on the fear, you're not spending an inordinate amount of money. You're going to have to spend some here probably because there's people who are going to be helping you. But overall, if you'll stop chasing your tail Yeah, because I don't buy any more medical devices. I don't go to see doctors for my spine. I don't have pain. Saving all that money. Yeah, it's interesting topic, isn't it? Traps and pitfalls, hiding places. Oh gosh. Anything could be a hiding place. One thing I keep seeing in somewhat in KI is, in second dimension, you can learn how to inquire into deficiency stories through our unfindable inquiry or through reverse inquiry. You can start pulling up this identity of yours that's like, I am not good enough. There's something wrong with me. And that's actually helpful. That's the thing. It's actually very helpful to become awake to that and to see it for what it is and to see that it's coming and going to you. And you actually feel the freedom from that. So it's just like anything, there's a benefit. It's like good to do that work and it's limiting, right? It's just like it's good to meditate. It's good to rest as awareness. That's like really great. Everybody should do that. And it's limiting in the sense that it doesn't get to the root quite often in the body, hidden. Same with second dimension, basically. It's great. You can now see the deficiency story because it's held in the body, like I'm not good enough. You start seeing it, you start feeling different, start waking up, embodying that. But you can't get to the repression in second dimension. People think that they are, but they're not really. Or if they are, I haven't seen it yet. So what they do is they camp out in processes around the deficiency story or the shadow. Like they like get really good at it actually sometimes. And they might even train others or help others in it. Like I can help you with, and they can actually help you with self-limiting beliefs. And you could walk away from that like session, or if you do it yourself, like, wow, I feel so much freer, which is great. However, the root issue hasn't been dealt with it. So it's like going to a garden and you just pulled up all the stuff. And so it's clear right now, but the roots are still there. And so it's a matter of time. That's either going to turn into what? Pain or disease or more triggers. So just camping out in identity processes, like who am I? When that's really connected to the trauma. See, as a trap, because you just get stuck there. It's like a dualistic hall of mirrors. It just keeps coming. Am I this? I'm bad. I'm good. I'm right. I'm wrong. I'm blah, 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 blah. All of that being generated from an emotional thing in your body that's being overlooked in that trap of staying in that identity thing. Or staying in just shadow work is another trap. Like just processing shadows, almost like on the mind level of the mind, like turnarounds or shadows or whatever, and just in the mind, and missing the fact that it's tied to repression. And then just keep doing it. Right? It's still better than not doing shadow work. So it's like, it's great that you're doing that and it's limiting and become a trap. One of the biggest traps is just landing. I mean, it's its own thing. So landing is a term, I don't know, they probably other teachings use it. Dan and Toshi and I use it. All of us use it actually in KI or I think that Dan and I and Toshi started using it first to kind of point for people, but then now it's become part of the language of KI. But it just means that it means basically landing on some belief or position or way of being or something that's you're doing it to get love or to stay safe. And that's the reason for it. But it might look like it actually might come at first like a true insight. So it might be like, I think the best example would be like when you have a moment, or not the best example, but a good one. If you have a moment of just seeing that presence is non-dual, like there's a sense of oneness, for example, and it's a real insight or a real seeing. And then that was an experience that you had, but then you still have trauma or repression. So that's active still. But your mind goes back to it, or you try to go back to the experience of it, or your mind does, or it says things like, well, it's all one, or it's just something, some spiritual thing, which then becomes a way for you to stay safe. So you're just landing in some idea of a past memory or a past experience that actually protects you in this moment from going to what you're running from, the root of your suffering. So we all land. The question is, how hard do you land and for what reason? Are you landing just to stay safe? And that's going to be suffering. Whenever we land for safety or to get love, usually we're holding that in the body because that's trauma. So that's going to manifest in some way. Even if we temporarily feel better from the landing, and we will, like we'll land even in meditation practices or certain practices that feel safer and bring about a lighterness, and we don't have to deal with the darkness. So we might land in that practice. And then at first it's temporarily good. We feel good, but see, we don't realize what we're doing is we're just avoiding again. And so in some way, the trauma is going to manifest later. We're bamboozling ourselves through the practice, or we're bamboozling ourselves through by going back to the same pointer, or the same insight, when truthfully, we need to open up to what we're afraid to feel. That's where our practice needs to go. But we keep going to like this one way of seeing things or this one insight, and they're just staying safe. It's a landing. Our biggest landing point, maybe you could say, is on the repression itself. It's quite natural, and we're all innocent because we're just doing it to survive. But while we're talking about landings, we should talk about the great landing, which is, I can't. I'm afraid to get angry. I'm afraid to feel it. I'm afraid of sad. I'm not going to cry. I'm afraid. Land. That's where we land early in childhood, and we just land and stay there. So that will be the ultimate landing place, no matter what happens in KI. That'll probably be underpinning it. You know, even if we land on a certain spiritual platitude, if we go into our body, we'll find that, you know, guess what? It's the same culprit, the same sadness, repression. Don't want to feel that. So the mind goes, land. Now I feel certain. Now I feel like I know something. Now I feel safer. But that's unconscious. We don't know that that's what's going on. We just land. We just believe it. We repeat it as if it's true. We don't check into our body. That's the whole thing. If you'll check into your body with skill, like through the somatic testing in different ways, you really can't go wrong. So that's another trap here. It's going down the list, is just not trusting your body. And so that's a trap that manifests in a lot of different ways. It's so innocent. Like when you first get here and you say, Scott, like, do you think I'm repressing anger or sadness more? And I'll say, you're the only one that could ever answer that. Let me show you how to discover it. And then later on, if you say, well, Scott, you know, I did get triggered. Do you think that that trigger was from the repression? That's you just not trusting your body. And it could be a skill issue. Like you don't know how to test it out. But if you want to keep giving your power away to other people, you'll just not learn the skills and not test it out for yourself. Once you learn the skills and test it out for yourself, you take the outside people away. You're less dependent on them. Therapist, doctor, teacher, trainer, period. Because then it's like, oh, I'm triggered. Well, let me see if anger repression is behind it. I know exactly how to do that now. See, so just not trusting the body. And then that goes deep, because then when people, for example, as I've said in the snake in the grass type videos and the quiet control, the quiet bullying type videos, is that a lot of times when we repress anger, we do some anger repression work, but then we just get into back to this habit of kind of shutting down in certain relationships still and not seeing that we're shutting down. For example, just not speaking, not expressing ourselves, not letting people know how we feel, all that vulnerability. And so, okay, there's a couple of like traps here. I don't know if you want to call it traps, but I guess you could say it's a hiding place, or a trap is when we don't see that this is our experience. It's our body. We're the only ones that can wake up out of it. And if we don't see, for example, how I've created this lived inquiry for you, like I've shown you, there's your chronic pain. It's because you're holding anger back. If you're an anger repressor, that's why it's flared up today. There's your trigger. There's your issue with authority and big energy. You're an anger repressor. I've shown you how to process all of that. Everything that's going on in your life, from the stress to the anxiety to the depression, I'm showing you the root of it. I'm showing you how to inquire. But for whatever reason, one of the traps is just not listening or not following along or tuning me out, getting triggered in some way, even at me, and you stop listening. Because what I've been doing in the last 2 months has been helping all of you make it a lived inquiry in every way to help with the healing process. But again, one of the traps is people disconnect. So again, there's a lot of anger repressors getting triggered at me because of coming out of repression and saying certain things that are triggering, and then they stop listening. See, and then you don't have a lived inquiry. And even if I'm one of the triggers or somebody else, doesn't have to be me, here's you've lost opportunity. You're disconnecting with somebody and back into the old habits. And if you do that with me and Dan or the trainers, then you're cutting off your access to this work. Like until you're able to trust yourself, you're cutting off the people who can help you. So you have to be very careful. Be very careful with the lack of a lived inquiry in your life. At some point when you recognize I've got compulsions, but I don't bring KI to them and I don't know how to do the repression work with those compulsions, and you don't learn it. Or I've got chronic pain. I know Scott talks about how to do it, but I'm not going to learn it, or I didn't learn it and I have continued chronic pain. Here's my shadows. I know Scott explains it. I know he's shown me the process, but I'm not going to learn it and I don't do it. And then you wonder why you're still suffering. You wonder why you're in chronic pain. And yet I've outlined all of that for you. So one of the traps is just, again, fogging out and not, just follow me, guys. Just follow me. If you've trusted me up until now, trust me. And when you start to fog out and go your own way, just be careful. Be careful, because this is the land of bypass. See, so what we've created KI as a way to as the antidote to that. So when you start fogging out, you're probably going back into it. Just be careful. In various ways, just be careful with the old patterns coming back, and you are suffering, but you're not making it a lived inquiry. And at some point, really everybody has to make it a lived inquiry, because your chronic pain is your repression, your shadows are your repression, your trauma. If you don't make it a lived inquiry, those forms of suffering most likely would continue because you're trying to stay safe and get love. See that? Just putting it all together so that you can have a greater understanding of what we're doing here. We want you to stay around. Like, I mean, I love helping people, but of course, the chips will fall where they may. We're just trying to help, though, because we understand, Dan and I think understand, because we've lived it, how foggy humans can get around this subject. Traps and hiding places. It's funny when I get to the end of a video and my mind is basically like, there's nothing. But I know if there is, I want to cover it, because I always like to, when I cover these days, when I cover a topic, I like to put everything in it. So it's like a place, like a resource, and you can just go right back to it. Everything is here. And as soon as I say that, I go quiet. Oh, I'm glad that I just sit in quietness, because stuff comes up. Here's one. Backdoor. I'll just call it backdoor. But basically in third dimension, we have these inquiries called first door, second door, and backdoor. And they basically represent the ways in which how do I say that? The ways in which we don't heal. What stops us from healing are like these doors that don't really exist, but they're just metaphors, like, in a way. So the first door is like, let's say if you have chronic pain or you have energy that you store somewhere, like in a chakra area. So I don't want to feel that. First door. There's my baby. She's drinking right now. So I'm gonna have a drink. The first door is that kind of conditioning that shuts you down. I don't want to feel that. And so we numb out and we self-soothe and we don't heal that because the conditioning says, I don't want to. And it's resistance. The second door is that there is anger or sadness in that, stored in that, right? That's the repression. But there's a resistance to that anger or sadness. There's conditioning in here that says no to that. And that's what keeps us sick or makes us sick or keeps us in pain or whatever else, is that door of not reversing the repression, right? But the back door is there's actually conditioning that says, I don't want to get rid of that. I don't want to get rid of my anger repression. Why would I want to do that? I have literally gotten so much from that. I've gotten love. I've stayed safe all of my life. And so that conditioning basically says, no, I don't want to let go of it. And so that's going on like this constantly. One of the traps here is not having a good context around the fact that you really don't want to be free and you don't want to heal on some level, like that you actually want to suffer. But it's not that you want to suffer, it's that you want to stay safe, right? Totally, because survival. So it's not really that you want to suffer, it's that that your need for safety keeps you suffering because you keep landing in different places that are avoidant of certain scary emotions. Stay safe, right? So here, this acts as like we're doing all this work, but we're not acknowledging there's an aspect of ourselves that doesn't want to let go of this. And so the trap there is just ignoring that and pretending like we're actually fully interested in freedom and healing, pretending like just like lying to ourselves and others. I'm here to be free. No, you're not. And that's not why you're really here. Yeah, on some level, you have that impulse to be free. We all do. But you have to recognize you want to stay safe. You want to get love. And if you don't recognize that part of you that doesn't want to let go of that, that part will just sabotage this, or you just won't heal. You won't get to where you're working at. You won't work through any trauma because it's going to stop you. You're not going to work through it completely because you don't want to. And if you're not making that conditioning conscious, that unconscious conditioning just runs everything. It's like you can go so far, but not really that far because you don't want to, afraid. If you would ask your conscious mind, if you would say, I want to be totally free. If you totally disconnected from your body, your mind might say, yeah, I do. But if you went into your body, because your body can't lie, that's where you find that, no, I need to stay safe. I don't want to feel that. But see, there are bigger traps with spirituality, but I've already covered that. KI addresses all that. So one of the big traps in spirituality is just staying in first dimension, just staying in meditation and missing the trauma and the repression, creating all that stuff that you're meditating with. But that's already covered. I really want to talk about the traps in KI and the hiding places. Well, here's a subtle one is I've seen people like become interested in learning the skills, but not really interested in what it takes to truly be free. And I know that's actually a different thing. They're two different things and they're both important because we have to have the skill to meet this very difficult subject of trauma. We really need the skill. At the same time, its skill is not enough because we have to have context. We have to really understand what we're doing here. And there's a road being carved out for us that keeps us from just avoiding. The way that the inside out path and the way that the practices are designed is to help you meet what you're avoiding. We've laid it out for you, but just because we've laid it out for you clearly, well, I would say watch out for becoming just really resistant to something that we say along the path. Like maybe it sneaks up on you. It's like you trust the path because you start trusting your own experience. Like KI, you start trusting because it's opening you up. But then, like something that we say hits you wrong. And instead of really seeing where your trigger or your resistance is coming from, you just let it shut you down. So that's the thing, is just because we're developing more. And there's people who've said, well, what about this inside out path? But are you really listening to what I'm saying? Because the inside out path is simply just the next step in everything that we've talked about. We have these three dimensions, right? And it's not till we get to the third dimension of practice that many of us are even able to heal trauma or reverse repression. Why would we want to wait until the end and be blind to all of the effects of the trauma? Well, don't we want to start from the beginning and stop bypassing? But there'd be people who said, but why the inside out thing? Because they're just like disagreeing on from some trauma response, right? Or just something that scares them and they're not checking in. And so we lose them because it's just because of introducing something. Like I introduced the map, and certain people who had followed me and liked the fact that I didn't have graphics said to me, you are this stuff with the map, it's too conceptual. That right there was a knee-jerk response, because what I was trying to show you is how to go deeper in experience with the map. But see what I mean? Just look for the knee-jerk responses where you don't consider something deeply that I'm saying. Like you just don't sit down and really listen because maybe you're avoidant in a certain way, right? Yeah, sorry, I keep getting a call, guys. Give me a second here. That was my husband trying to call, telling me he's going to a movie. I still call him my husband, even though we're divorced. Yeah, just if you'll just have some patience with me, I'm just seeing this if anything else comes up. I assume this helps and that you guys can handle just hanging out with me for a while. I don't have the bullet points. I don't have on my script. I don't have anything written out. And so it can be, like this, where I have to just sit with it. There's a little more here, though. I can feel it. Oh, yeah, here's one. Is sort of maybe misunderstanding how we're suggesting inquiry. So like thinking of it too much as a linear process, even though there's a linear aspect to it, like because there's changes that happen over time. And of course, as you go deeper into like reversing repression, there are deeper changes, like there's deeper freedom. And then it's linear in that way. It's an embodiment process, but it's not becoming better people. It's not having a better story. It's definitely embodiment, and it's experientially deeper. So as you go, so there's that. But then if people, while they're doing inquiry, it's kind of how they're doing it. So for example, if you conjure something up, let's say second dimension, you say, I'm lovable. And these thoughts come up that try to convince you, along with energy, that you're unlovable. And that you might be thinking there might be some sort of like subtext for you, or like conditioning in the background that says, I just have to get through all of this. Like you're thinking of it as like, I got to get to the end. And I think that might be the wrong way of looking at it. Let's do it differently, so that the whole point of inquiry is to see and allow each thing fully. So there's more, one aspect of it is to recognize more and more that you as presence are the ground to which it all comes and goes, that there's not like that it's not you. You could say it's allowed to come and go, but you have to kind of just really see things coming and going. It's just like that. It's like this thought comes and I really think it's me, but I just allow it, and I allow it along with the energy, and then it falls away and I see I'm the awareness that remains. And I keep seeing that each time, so that you're working through deep stuff and recognizing the awareness along the way. So it's awareness and embodiment. See that? So through the process, you're recognizing all this stuff comes and goes to the awareness, but the awareness remains. And as I move through these things, there's a deeper recognition of that, a deeper embodiment of it. But it's not really about getting to the end. It's about being with everything, being skillful in terms of what you're conjuring up, bringing the right stuff into awareness. Like if you're angry or an anger repressor, I'm angry is the right stuff. And then when it comes in, it's fully welcoming it. Instead of trying to get to the end or get rid of things, fully welcoming as if you want it to stay around. Welcome, 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 welcome. That's the right attitude. With second and third dimension work is just fully welcome and allow everything. We're not getting to the end. That's going to serve you really well, actually. So it would be like, I'm lovable. No, you're a failure. But as soon as you see the thought, you start welcoming it, like you don't want to push it away. It's like a lost child. Welcome it, allow it, keep allowing it, keep allowing it. You're doing something different, see, because you're already in resistance to this, the ego's resistance. So as soon as that comes up, you're welcoming it. You're counterbalancing the resistance by welcoming and loving everything. So that's another trap, I think, is that with KI especially, is that we're dealing with deep unconscious stuff that when we bring it up, there's resistance to it because it's repression. So how you relate to the phenomena is everything. I actually think that if you just stand here and not work with the resistance, you can actually bypass that way, because I think you might be assuming that you're actually just being with something, like that you're really just allowing it. But there's just so much unconscious resistance that's coming up. So you're better off counterbalancing the resistance that's already there by welcoming whatever you see and having that loving, compassionate attitude towards it, to welcome it and allow each thing. That counterbalances the resistance. I don't think you should just stand there as if you're just awareness, because you could be totally resisting something there, and not seeing it, for example, not welcoming it in some way. That's my suggestion. And I've simply, in practice, I've seen that help people more when they do it the way that I'm suggesting. Help people sort of move through things and still feel regulated and go deeper and deeper in this work. One of the traps, I'm just listing them all, is not understanding the difference between horizontal and vertical and what they both do that are different. I'm not going to pull up the map because I think you guys have been following along and you know what I mean by that. If you don't, then go back and watch some videos, because you're not following me completely and I don't want to lose you here going forward. But basically, first and second dimension are horizontal. All that means is things arise one after the other to awareness. Sitting in meditation or in inquiry, even second dimension, and something's coming up and you're seeing thought, or feeling, one after the other, like this. A, B, C, D. Well, what we learned, though, is trauma is energetic and embodiment is an energetic endeavor. So there's emotion stuck in the body. So we have to learn how to start where there's a lot of energy on one thing and go vertical, which means uproot the deep repression connected to this thought. It's not just seeing each thought go by like cars. Some cars are like really important because they are like attached to trauma, certain thoughts. And so you have to learn how to go deep. And that's the third dimension work. So one of the traps is just not really understanding how third dimension vertical works much more skillfully, I think, on the deep, stuck, stored emotions and contractions and chronic pain. Oh, I'm sorry. It's like a video where you just like give a bunch of bad news. It's like, oh yeah, here's another thing. But it's good to just get it out there so that once you call something out, it's different. If you don't know what's happening, it has the best of you. But once you call it out, even if you're still doing it, it's not the same, right? You can't just continue to do it once you call it out without noticing that. And the next trap is the Cartesian split. I have to bring that in here. So this is funny because I keep doing I do this Cartesian post split on Facebook where I explain what it is and why it's so important. And because I think there's just so much unconsciousness and spirituality. I'm sorry. A lot of you guys that watch me or that are really tuned into the work, you get it and you'll like it. But a lot of people, I think we're tuning out of this one. it just makes sense that we would tune out of this one. Because what it does is it threatens people's practices. It scares people. They don't want to read this. They don't want to hear this. Like, to find out that your meditation practice is basically reinforcing a mind-body disconnect. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's actually very easy to do with meditation. The way that it works would be you came here with a mind-body disconnect, which just means you came here with trauma and repression. So that means you're storing anger or sadness. And the way you did that is that the mind and the body work together as a child to store that. Now that's not coming up because it's protecting you. That's a mind-body mechanism stored essentially in the somatic body. When you're meditating, that doesn't come up. So the mind and body is already disconnected. Like you're not even aware that you're storing anger. You're not aware directly of the thoughts that store the anger. Those are all buried. So you're resting as awareness or meditating, and you're not making that unconscious mind conscious, the storing anger. So you're just sort of sitting in the split. You're just seeing thoughts that are coming up that are basically safe in the sense that they are not connected to the anger. So the mind and the mind is offline totally around anger or sadness. Like you don't even know that you're, basically what that means is you don't know you're repressed. It's that buried. The Cartesian split ends up just being the same thing as the bypass. But by talking about it as a mind-body split, sometimes people will hear it like, because they understand on some level maybe that the mind and body are connected to everything. And then they might understand that they have like a contraction that's anger repression. And then they might be sitting on the meditation mat and they realize that they can't dissolve that contraction. It doesn't really dissolve. Or it might get better during meditation, but it comes back after. Sooner or later, they start hearing me and they go, oh, so I'm not even aware of the unconscious mind that's storing anger. Right. That's the Cartesian split. And you're engaged in spiritual practices, which make sure that you don't become aware of it, because none of the practices are there to conjure it up. So you're just resting and meditating. At best, you're seeing the effects of the repression and trauma, but the mechanism itself doesn't come up, mind-body connection. So you can assume that chronic pain, disease, and contraction will continue on some level, and you're still going to be triggered by your mom and dad and your wife periodically because of the trauma not being met, and any number of other things that can come from that Cartesian split. It can happen in first and second dimension. It's corrected in third dimension. It starts to get corrected in KI second dimension because we're becoming conscious of the mind-body repression mechanism. One of the traps on the addiction side of the thing, and everybody should hear this, because even if addiction is not your thing, there's probably one or more habits that you have. And dark chocolate is not one of them for me, really. Not really. Compulsion, I mean, but everybody has certain habits that they go to for soothing. So I want you to expand the definition of addiction and compulsion here to include, for this, let's bring the map up. I'm going to quit soon here, guys. But lately I've just tried to put everything in a video when I talk about a subject so that I can just come back later and say, oh yeah, that's in the traps and hiding places video. But check it out. And therefore I don't have to keep repeating. Hold on a second here. There it is. This is the iceberg for our natural recovery thing. And basically what this is it just shows you where to focus. See, if you do the trauma and repression work, you're focusing on the drivers that ultimately drive the suffering at the tip of the iceberg. And so we tend to go at the tip of the iceberg to certain areas, which are like resources, where we default to self-soothing and safety, like temporarily feeling better, temporarily, feeling peaceful through drugs, through meditative practices, whatever. Any resource that essentially takes us away from the source of suffering and ends up sort of soothing or regulating or making us feel temporarily better is good in the short term, but ends up becoming part of the problem, a big part of the problem, because it's being driven by the repression. Makes sense, right? If I repress anger, of course, the alcohol helps to suppress the anger. I'm going to keep doing it. But if I suppress anger, so does the meditation. See, I might have quit drinking, but now the meditation is actually helping me keep anger down because of the Cartesian split, right? Or some other thing like a philosophy, a religion, a spiritual practice, something. And not seeing that that's basically going to continue because it's being driven by repression and trauma until the repression or trauma is made conscious and transmuted, you could say. So one of the traps that people have is trying to put down something or put down everything before they've really made that conscious and transmuted that repression and trauma. So they come in early and they try to quit eating such and such, but then they haven't done the work that allows their system to do that. So they keep going back to it, not really understanding the relationship between trauma and repression well enough, trying to force behavior to change, but it doesn't work. Or another way that we can fall into a trap is that because we don't use anymore, like drugs or alcohol, we might have a certain practice or a certain way of inquiring, which is like a substitute. It's actually soothing us in the way that drugs or alcohol could or did, and we don't see the pattern. So we don't see how we keep going to it and how we're avoiding a repression. But here's the thing. It's like with any addiction. Go 2 weeks without it. You should be fine. So if you meditate every morning, go 2 weeks without that. If you're feeling a response to that, then that meditation is probably covering up trauma. If you're feeling something right now, that's like, if you say, no, I think I want to keep meditating, that's your trauma. It looks like it's a spiritual thing, but it's actually your system. See, you have to trust your body. Your body's doing this. It's saying no to that. Or some other practice that you've done, say, I'm going to stop it for 2 weeks. See what happens. If there's no response to that, then actually just quit for 2 weeks and then come back to it with a skillful KI practice. If you're white knuckling it for 2 weeks, I would say take a deeper look at that. If you're really suffering by not doing it, if it brings up your shit, if you stop doing something for 2 weeks and it brings up a bunch of stuff, then that's what it was doing. It was covering up that stuff. I'm not even suggesting stopping doing that stuff. I would just say no. Even if you don't stop, like some people don't stop smoking weed. I still smoke weed from time to time. I'm not going cold turkey on something like that. I have a different relationship with it. So I would just say check into your relationship with the resources, because any of the resources which are feeding the repression or coming from the repression tend to be more compulsive. They're harder to let go of, and you can trust that. The harder something is to let go of, there's more there with it. Obviously, it's pretty obvious. I don't want to keep you guys here. I just want to make sure, I know there's some of you who really do want to hear all this. So I'm making sure because as soon as I click off, it'll be like, oh, I forgot to mention that. Please, please, please recognize that I've already said it, that one of the traps is not looking at all your shadows. It gets so many people. And the big one is the authority shadow. How many times I've had people go really, really deep and trust me and just find all this freedom, and then they hit their dad trauma and they project it onto me. And suddenly now they're mad at me because I'm like the authority and they don't even listen to me. Anger repressors, watch out for that one. Watch out for your shadows. That's how you're going to stay safe. That's how you're not going to heal here if you're not careful. The thing is what I say to anger repressors is, I may do something that you should be upset about, but your problem is you're not saying it to me. You're disconnecting. So just watch for that, where you just shut me out and you stop listening, right? You don't go listen to me anymore. Or when you listen, you've got this resentment. That's fine. Of course, you have every right, but be careful, because you see, that's the same thing. That's the thing that brought you here. And I'm probably the person that pointed out the way to work with that. And so now if you're shutting me out, that's convenient. Look, it's me now, it's somebody else later. You're not getting to something. Process me now. Process all your triggers all the time, all your shadows. You rob yourself of deeper freedom when you don't do this. Hate to say that, but that's the truth. You rob yourself when you don't look at your shadows. Then why would you want to rob yourself when the riches are so great? Freedom. Oh, okay, here's another trap. Sorry, you just keep coming. I don't know how long this video is. Do I want to bring this up? Yeah, I always bring it up. I'm done. When am I going to be done? How long will this take? It's a trap. Because the way that I hear this is what you're saying is, how long will I have to feel and express my emotions? How long will I have to be here and be authentic? You don't have to. Like, there's nobody keeping you here. But when you ask me how long, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing you're here because you want to open to your authentic emotions and awaken to that. And then you're asking me how long. There's no way I can answer that. Basically, I need to come to your house and I need to watch what you do to answer the question. So when your spouse triggers you, I need to see how long it takes you to see that you're holding back emotion. Like when you're shadowing something at your boss, I need to say how long it takes you. I need to see how long it takes you to stay in chronic pain before you realize it's anger repression and you process it. You're the only one that can answer those questions. I know I said that earlier, but that's another kind of a separate trap. It's not just the seeking thing. It's like where you just like give your power away to somebody. You think that I can answer the question of how long it will take you to open to your emotions. That's what I hear when you say it. So don't fall into that trap. When you start to wonder how long this could take forever, what you're really saying is, I don't want to feel that. It's going to take me a long time because I don't want to feel that. And then you can't put it on anybody and you can't ask anybody because they can't answer it. Only you can. And you don't know how long it'll take. That's just a story, how long it'll take. The question is, are you open to it now or not? Oh, here's a trap. So basically there's this cross section between, or intersection between, the recognition of awareness and the embodiment of it. So the recognition of awareness can bring this greater sense of peace and expansiveness and like, hey man, all is well. Like there's not a problem. It's just presence. It's very peaceful. It's nice. But then the repression hides in the body. And so you can actually experience that presence and think, well, that's just a sensation in the body. What does that matter? And it actually doesn't. In the greater sense of things, that's just a sensation. But if you pay attention, that sensation is behind your shame, how you're hiding from people, or you're holding your emotions back with your wife, or when you get triggered, that's involved, or maybe that's an ongoing something, or the source of shadows. So what is just a sensation in the presence ends up being the root of suffering in your life. So the the intersection should include both the recognition, but without using that to avoid the body. And the body work should include the recognition. So we don't want to just do trauma inquiry without recognizing ourselves as that awareness. And we don't want to recognize the awareness without recognizing the trauma is running things. Balance between those two. Either way, you can stay safe there. So safe that you don't really go as deep as you might want to with that. That's the Scott Killaby bypass. Presence. That's all there is. Anger. Where? There's no anger. I have pain, and that's not anything until it got worse. See, that's the thing, is like what you ignore in the body, those sensations that are seemingly nothing can turn into something, or yeah, they're already the source of something that you don't see. okay, I'm just going to end with a few relational traps because isn't that the juicy stuff? That's the stuff like this whole thing about spirituality, these realizations and stuff is rather dry compared to the juice of relationship. Like that to me is what life is all about is relationship. Like I have so much to explore with just my partner. I don't need any, like that's enough. It's entire universe to just see the dynamics between us and explore the vulnerability and give and take and tension and all that, release and all that is quite a dance in and of itself. Relationship, but then there's all these other relationships because we're in relationship to everything, right? Not just our romantic partners, but everyone and everything. And so there's these definite traps and hiding places in relationships. And excuse me as I repeat some of this, but one of the biggest traps is not knowing your primary in a relationship. And then especially if you're kind of trauma bonding with an opposite. I talked about it recently, but it's good to hear it again. So if you're an anger repressor, you might naturally be drawn to sadness repressors, but then you've got the recipe for a lot of drama, because you're holding anger back. So anger is your shadow. Sadness repressors like to get angrier often because it's safer for them. Instead of expressing the hurt, they might show anger. That's a trigger for you because that's your shadow. So you're hooked by your trauma. And by the way, you might have been drawn to that person in the beginning because they had a certain energy that was a positive shadow. So like a big energy coming from a hurt repressor, for example, someone who can get angry or who can be dominating or something might be attractive to you who are small anger repressor. See that? And now you're trauma bonded into a relationship, which doesn't mean that's the only thing going on there. You might have a narrative like this is my soulmate or my twin flame or whatever, but I would say don't ignore the trauma bonding, right? Yeah, because I think that's the trap is you just ignore the emotional issue there, the trauma that's pulling you together. And then the trap then is, well, of course, not doing your own work in a relationship is a huge trap. Another trap is trying to get your partner to do it because usually that's coming from your own repression. Just think about it. If I repress anger, my partner over there who's a sadness repressor is getting angry. I need to fix her, stop her because I don't want to feel that. She's getting too close, but I might to the anger, but I might not acknowledge it to myself. I might just like try to help her, see, but it's not coming from just helping. I'm scared, but I'm not acknowledging it. So I would say trying to push this or any work on your partner is sketchy. I don't know. Be careful with that. That's a trap. I think you're hiding. We're hiding when we do that. We're hiding from our own fear of facing what we don't want to feel. When we try to control others, it's basically because we're trying to suppress our own emotions. We're trying to suppress those emotions or other emotions in them. But the problem with that is that we're acting as if we're trying to help. And that's just going to add problems most of the time, I think. So there's a trap. And then when you're in the relationship, though, one of the traps is not really continuing to go to your primary with regard to most of the issues in the relationship. This is just a problem with KI generally. This is my last thing here. I think this is important though, is like, see, through the years, I inquired in a whole bunch of different things that didn't have any relevance. Basically, the real relevance here is that I was storing anger, some hurt, and fear in my body from childhood. And that was, as I've said before, it was the source of so much suffering. With, I finally learned after a lot of chronic pain and a lot of, issues that weren't being resolved, that I needed to go to anger. And then I learned how to just keep going to that, not putting it on him necessarily, but processing, feeling, and allowing anger. And as soon as I did that, things just started to clear up, at least on my side, eventually then on his side, but only when I stopped trying to get him to do the work and focus not only on my side of the street, but on the right things. See, because I've been focusing on my side of the street through the years, but I've been bypassing into safer emotions and deficiency stories and ego, non-dual stuff. Here we get to the root of it. It's I didn't want to feel anger. Trauma was the root of it. So then once I learned that, going to that every time, And then whenever I would think it would be something else, no, go to the root, because it was almost always the root in some way, or by going to the root, anger, repression, it would take me where I need to go. But by avoiding it, I couldn't really get to it. So there's a hard-headedness that can be a trap where we're actually still hiding, which is like, we don't recognize that you're shutting down right now, that's your anger repression. You're not speaking your emotions to your partner or your mom. See that? And then not recognizing that is anger repression, or that is sadness repression, whatever it is. And again, bamboozling yourself into thinking it's a myriad of issues about bills or even whatever. Like, if you'll trust me long enough to test this out, no, it's the trauma, it's the repression driving almost everything. Almost. And if not, it's like survival beliefs that are held in the body, like just fear, basically, that's hiding in the body like trauma does. So if you'll trust me here, and just don't fall into that trap of thinking, once you know what your primary is, you know what your work is. So if you get off of your work, notice how your relationship doesn't work. It stops working when you stop being emotionally honest. Or it doesn't work. And you just have to notice that. So what does that mean? When you're not being emotionally honest, it means you're not working with your primary repression. And when you're not being emotionally honest, that's when you have all the issues. The false self comes up, their projection and shadow and self-protection and defense and attack, all because you're protecting fundamentally yourself from feeling and expressing that. That feels complete. But if I sit here quietly, something else might come up. So what I'm going to do is say goodbye. Bye, guys.